For most people, social media has become a normal extension of daily life. Moments are shared, opinions are posted, and experiences are documented almost automatically. Visibility is often treated as connection, and participation is assumed to be natural. Because of this, when someone chooses not to use social media or rarely appears on it, the absence is noticed. They may be seen as private, distant, or disconnected. However, avoiding social media is not always about withdrawal. In many cases, it reflects a different perception of attention, identity, and interaction. Some people step away from these platforms not because they lack connection, but because they understand something about them that others overlook. They protect their attention. One of the primary differences lies in how attention is valued. Social media environments are designed to fragment focus through constant updates, notifications, and rapid shifts in content. For many users, this fragmentation becomes normalized, and attention moves continuously between stimuli. Individuals who avoid social media often perceive this dynamic more clearly. They recognize that sustained attention is limited and easily depleted, and they prefer to preserve it rather than distribute it across numerous digital inputs. This difference influences how experiences are processed. Instead of documenting moments or sharing them publicly, they tend to engage with them directly and privately. Activities are experienced for their own sake rather than for presentation. Over time, this pattern reinforces deeper concentration and presence. The choice to avoid social media therefore becomes less about technology itself and more about protecting cognitive space. Attention is treated as a resource that shapes perception, and limiting fragmentation helps maintain clarity and mental continuity. They value authenticity. Another important factor is how identity is expressed. Social media encourages selective presentation, where individuals curate aspects of their lives for visibility. Even when content is genuine, the act of sharing introduces an element of performance. Individuals who avoid these platforms often feel uncomfortable with this dynamic. They prefer interactions that occur without audience awareness or public framing. For them, experiences retain meaning when they remain unobserved and unedited. Conversations, achievements, and personal moments are valued more when they are lived rather than displayed. This perspective reflects a desire to maintain coherence between internal identity and outward behavior. When identity is not shaped by visibility or feedback, it remains more stable and self-defined. Avoiding social media therefore becomes a way of preserving authenticity rather than rejecting connection. They avoid comparison. Another reason some people step away from social media lies in how they perceive its emotional effects. Social platforms present a continuous stream of curated lives, achievements, and experiences, which naturally invites comparison. Even when users understand intellectually that what they see is selective, repeated exposure can still influence mood and self-evaluation. Over time, this environment can encourage subtle competition, validation seeking, and dissatisfaction with ordinary life. Individuals who avoid social media often recognize this dynamic early. They become aware that constant comparison distorts perception by emphasizing external measures of worth, such as visibility, popularity, or lifestyle display. Instead of allowing their self-assessment to fluctuate with these signals, they prefer to maintain internal reference points. Their sense of value comes more from lived experience than from observed contrast. By reducing exposure to comparison triggers, emotional stability increases. Daily life feels less evaluated and more directly experienced. Satisfaction becomes less dependent on how life appears relative to others. Avoidance of social media in this context reflects a preference for grounded self-perception rather than competitive self-assessment. They value privacy. A further distinction involves how personal information is treated. Social media encourages sharing, visibility, and accessibility, often blurring the boundary between public and private life. Many users gradually become accustomed to this transparency, and sharing becomes habitual rather than deliberate. Individuals who avoid social media tend to view personal experiences differently. They often see privacy not as secrecy but as ownership. Moments that remain unshared retain a sense of personal significance that can feel diminished when made public. Relationships, thoughts, and achievements are considered more meaningful when they exist within a limited circle rather than broad exposure. maintaining privacy also preserves autonomy. Without the expectation of documentation or audience response, experiences remain self-directed rather than externally framed. This reduces pressure to present or interpret events for others. Avoiding social media therefore becomes a way of sustaining boundaries and preserving an internal life that is not continuously visible. These choices reflect not withdrawal from connection, but selectivity in how connection occurs. In the final section, we explore how this perspective shapes reward, values, and priorities in everyday life. They don't seek validation. Another factor that influences social media avoidance is how reward is experienced. Social platforms operate on visible feedback loops, where likes, comments, and engagement provide immediate external reinforcement. For many users, these signals gradually shape behavior, encouraging content that attracts response and discouraging what does not. Over time, this dynamic can shift motivation from internal satisfaction toward external approval. Individuals who avoid social media often recognize this mechanism and choose not to rely on it. Their sense of reward is more closely tied to direct experience rather than audience reaction. Achievements feel complete without public acknowledgement, and enjoyment does not require documentation. By removing external feedback from the equation, actions remain aligned with personal meaning instead of visibility. This reduces dependence on approval and stabilizes motivation around intrinsic values. They choose depth. Avoiding social media also reflects differences in how time and engagement are prioritized. Social platforms encourage rapid consumption of many brief inputs, which can gradually fragment attention and reduce immersion. Individuals who step away often prefer fewer inputs with greater depth. Activities such as reading, focused work, or direct conversation provide sustained engagement that is difficult to maintain within high-stimulation environments. This preference shapes lifestyle choices. Rather than distributing attention across many interactions, they invest it in selected relationships, interests, or pursuits. The result is not isolation, but concentration. Experiences are fewer in number, but richer in involvement. Choosing depth over breadth reflects a value system that favors meaning over visibility and presence over exposure. What this reveals: avoiding social media does not necessarily indicate disconnection or withdrawal. In many cases, it reflects self-awareness about how attention, identity, and emotion are affected by digital environments. These individuals are not stepping away from people. They are stepping away from noise. By limiting comparison, preserving privacy, and maintaining intrinsic reward, they sustain a form of engagement that is quieter but often more stable and intentional. The final breakdown. Some people avoid social media because they protect their attention. They value authenticity over performance. They avoid comparison and preserve emotional stability. They maintain privacy and personal boundaries. They rely on intrinsic reward rather than validation. And they choose depth over constant exposure. Avoidance in this sense is not absence. It is a preference. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for the latest videos.